In this video, we'll talk about gameplay design. Gameplay is a way in which a game is experienced. This includes challenges and player actions, game mechanics and dynamics, game rules and resources, and other elements such as the story of the game and its aesthetics. Gameplay is the most important thing about a game, and as such, game design for both serious and entertainment games is all about designing gameplay. Every game involves challenges that the players need to overcome, and to do so, they must rely on their skills. If, to win a game, all the player needed to do was to click the Win the Game button, well, that wouldn't be a game. A key consideration in game design is maintaining a balance between the player's skill and the level of challenge, aiming for a challenge that is slightly above the player's current ability and that stimulates them to improve. If the challenge is too hard, the player will grow anxious or frustrated and give up. If the player is highly skilled and the challenge is low, the game will be boring. Finding this balance can be very tricky and relies on a lot of playtesting with your target audience, as well as potentially having variable difficulty levels, optional harder challenges, and so on. A good skill-challenge balance leads to what is known as the flow channel, helping the player achieve a state of flow, defined by psychologists Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi as a state of full immersion in an activity characterized by energized focus and pleasurable concentration. For most games, this is the mental state you would like your player to be in. We already discussed how different types of games involve different kinds of challenges. For example, physical challenges, which focus on timing and coordination, are widely used in action games, while logical and conceptual challenges are often found in puzzle games. Other types of challenges include pattern recognition and memory-based challenges, economic and resource management challenges, tactical and logistical challenges, spatial exploration, and others. Another important term in game design is game mechanics. A game mechanic is a single specific interaction that a player has with the game system. Game mechanics are like the atoms of gameplay, and are best described as verbs relating to the basic actions the player can perform in the game. For example, in Tetris, there are only two main mechanics. The players can rotate the following geometric blocks, known as tetraminos, or move them horizontally. There is also a third mechanic, speeding up the tetraminos fall, but it's not as essential. Some game mechanics may be more important than others. They're called core mechanics, which are essential mechanics that account for much of what the player does in the game. For example, in a platformer game like Super Mario, the core mechanics include running left and right, jumping, and collecting power-ups. There may be other mechanics involved, such as talking to non-player characters or reading signs, but if these are not at the core of the game experience, they are not considered to be core mechanics. Some games are based on just one powerful core mechanic, such as the puzzle game 2048, which is all about merging cells containing the same number to multiply it. Other games have many equally important mechanics, such as the WarioWare game series, which is essentially a collection of very short minigames. When you have several game mechanics acting on each other, complex system and player behaviors will emerge that are known as game dynamics. For example, the game dynamic of trading in a role-playing game involves such mechanics as picking up items, buying items from merchant characters, and selling your items to them. Or the dynamic of exploration in a shooting game involves looking around you using the mouse, moving in the 3D environment, jumping, potentially collecting key cards and using them to open doors to other locations in the game, etc. The core loop of the game is a chain that consists of core mechanics and dynamics that the player repeats throughout the game. For example, in a typical real-time strategy game, the core loop consists of collecting resources such as minerals and wood, using them to construct infrastructure, using the infrastructure to build units, and using units in combat against opponents, which in turn will grant you access to more resources to collect and build infrastructure and build units and use in combat ultimately. The main challenge of game design is creating a core loop that is engaging and doesn't get too repetitive too quickly. Core loops are also an important consideration in gamification, as discussed in another video. Speaking of game resources, many game genres rely on a variety of resources or measurable things whose value can change and affect the gameplay. In the aforementioned strategy game example, the main resources would be things like wood or gold or minerals, which can be expended on constructing buildings and units. In, say, a soccer simulation game, the main resources are the score, which determines which side won, and the time, which determines when the match ends. The combination of all the game resources in the game is known as the game economy. Some types of games, such as puzzle games, may not have much of a game economy or many or any game resources, although many will still have a basic resource such as player score. In addition to the resources, there are also game objects, which are individual things that cannot be measured or quantified, but that have an effect on the gameplay. These range from keys that open doors, to artifacts that make players more powerful, to magic scrolls, and so on. Consider the game challenges, mechanics, resources, and the core loop of your favorite digital or non-digital games. Think of how these concepts apply to your own game idea, and based on this, add a short gameplay section to your one-pager. And if you have questions, do get in touch.